Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today's subject is the Templar Knights, history, fiction, facts. And to discuss it with us, I have historian Thierry du Espirito from Paris by Skype. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for welcoming me, Denise.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to find out more about your recent book, Knights Templar for Dummies. So it splits up legend, facts. Tell us a little bit about the research. How long did it take you to research this book?
When you want to write this sort of book, you have to make a lot of researches. And it took me 2 years to write this book because you cannot only base your information on internet. You have also to go on the archive, on the libraries, and also you have to control, double check everything. So it took a long time to first, I would say, make the research. I would say 1 year and a half and 6 months to write it down.
Wow, that's great. And you also do a tour that complements the book in Paris. So tell us a little about that and how that famous Harry Potter character, Nicholas Flamel, fits into the overall picture.
Yes, the story and the itinerary is a way to show the real facts and the legends. So I'm mixing, I would say, different stops, for example, at Notre Dame, Holy Chapel, on the Ile de la Cité, at la Conciergerie, and even at the Square of the Temple in Paris. But also we have stops, for example, at the house of Nicholas Flamel, or also the bookshop of the Rosicrucian. And so it's a way to mix, you see, the story and the fiction and the legend and the myth, because now everything is gathered in a whole story.
That's great. So did Nicholas Flamel, he was known as an alchemist later in life. Is that how he started out?
So Nicholas Flamel was a businessman, and this is how he's related with the Knights Templar. He was first a businessman because he began to start. He started, a new business based on copying the books. You know, at this time there were no printing, so it was a great, I would say, improvement to get copies of books written by people. And Nicholas Flamel started this business of copying by hiring people to copy the books. And after that, he made a lot of money. And he, on the second part of his life, he decided to build charity houses in Paris, you know, to help poor people and make them access to new jobs. And now there is one of these charity houses still up in Paris. And this charity house is full of, on the facade is full of quotes and mystery words, which is very interesting to see for the visitors.
Oh, that sounds great. So the Knights Templar, how did they all start out and come about? It was an army built to protect pilgrims going from Europe to Israel, is that correct?
Yes, the Knights Templar started their activities in the Holy Land. You know, after the first crusade, people decided to settle in the Holy Land, and a big group decided to go back to Europe. And among the people who wanted to stay in Jerusalem, a small group of deeply religious guys decided to protect the pilgrim going to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was free now, and the roads were terribly unsafe. So this small group began to launch a new activity, patrolling along the road, building fortresses, and the king of Jerusalem asked them to go to Europe to ask for a sort of fundraising campaign. And a lot of people decided to give them mansion, fields, fortresses, and estates. And with this estate, the Knights Templar made business, and 1/3 of the revenues of the commanderies, because the commandery is the estate of the Knights Templar, 1/3 of the commandery were given to the fighting in Jerusalem. So it is very interesting and to see that the Knights Templar were building a new economic model based on working in Europe to finance the fighting in the Holy Land, in Palestine and now called Israel.
Right. And weren't a lot of those Templar Knights bankers and things like that, where people really trusted them as a group?
So, these guys were monks and they were knights at the same time, which is very, very uncommon at this time. You have order of chivalries, you have order of monks, but you have no order, mixed order like them. And this guy, you see, they were very involved in their economic situation, in the economic situation. They were making money with everything. They were making money, for example, in Paris with water mills powered by the river. And they were selling the use to the bakers of the neighborhood, for example. They were making wine in Burgundy, famous for the grape.
Yeah.
And they were making also salt near the Dead Sea. So everywhere they were getting the resources to finance their purpose. And they were also using, that's why now we consider them as bankers, but they were not really bankers. They were like having a good financial department, you see. They were making, for example, letter of change. Just imagine you are a knight and you want to go to Jerusalem, but you have a chest full of coin and silver, and maybe you are thinking that you will be robbed during the trip. So before leaving, you could go to the Knights Templar estate, give them the chest full of coin. In return, they will give you a letter with a seal and the sum. And with that, you will travel safely, like using a traveler check, you see. And when you would arrive in Jerusalem, the Knights Templar of Jerusalem would give you the counterpart. So they were very smart in business, making business and transferring money everywhere, which was very difficult to do at this time because they had no internet, I would say no fax or nothing, no mobile phone.
Right.
And just imagine 3,000 kilometers covered by this corporation. For me, it's a very smart organization.
Wow. So what happened that fateful Friday the 13th?
Yes, it's very famous because on Friday 13, the Knights Templar, Friday 1307, all the Knights Templar of France were arrested at the same time, which was the first police operation ever. All the seneschal of France received 1 month before a letter, but like in Mission Impossible, you see, one letter with a seal and another envelope inside to be opened 1 month later. And when they opened the second letter 1 month after, it was Friday 13 of 1307, and they have to arrest all the Knights Templar of their neighborhood. So we don't know if the date was chosen in purpose or if only if we have a sort of random occasion, but it's need to see that the story of the Knights Templar is made of this sort of fact.
Wow. It's amazing that nobody else opened the letter beforehand to give them a clue, like run. So what happened at the Notre Dame in Paris on that fateful the 13th?
Yes, on the last day, I would say very sad last day of Jacques de Molay. Jacques de Molay was the master, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And you know, all the Knights Templar were in prison. Most of them died in prison. Most of them died under torture, because at this time torture was part of the process of trial. And only the leaders were remaining in prison in the end. So they were brought in front of Notre Dame on their last day. And, you know, these guys were expecting to be freed by the cardinal, but the cardinal, who were obeying to the King of France, decided to condemn them to prison for life. And Jacques de Molay was very, very angry of this decision, because he was expecting for the pardon of the Pope and for the pardon of the King. And when he hears that he was condemned to prison for life, he made a very great decision. He said, I deny my confession. And it was, I would say, a very important decision, because while saying that, he knew that he will be burned the same day. Because when you made a confession and when you denied after that the confession, you were considered as relapse. Relapse, directly burned. But that was the horrible decision. And it was just in front of Notre Dame. And there is a place that you can see in my tour. This place is now called the Point Zero. And the Point Zero is the place where was the scaffold, where Jacques de Molay was brought on his last day.
And his last speech had legendary effects on the Pope and the King following his death. Did you find that to be true or coincidence? More coincidence?
It's difficult to say. It depends on your trust in, I would say, fiction or story. As an historian, I can only rely on evidence. So we know that after Notre Dame, Jacques de Molay was brought to the Hill de la Cité, the tip of the Hill de la Cité, where the itinerary is starting. And he was burned at stack, you see, at the stack.
Right.
And and a weird detail, it was a very slow burning, you see, not a big burst. And and but you know, here we have two versions. I would say the legend. The legend, Jacques de Molay, you know, just imagine the smoke begin to raise, and through the smoke you could hear the voice of Jacques de Molay telling, Pope Clement, King Philip, Knight Guillaume, before a year I call you to appear at the tribunal of God to receive your just punishment. Cursed, 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 you all will be cursed until the 13th generation of your race. This is very theatrical, this is very moving, you see, but we know now, and it's a real fact, that this quote was written by a French novelist in the 20th century. This novelist is called Maurice Druon. And it's based on different, I would say, other fictitious tales. But the real quote, we know also the real quote, because we have witnesses who witness and we attend the burning of Jacques de Molay. And he only say, you know, God knows who is wrong and who has sinned. And God will avenge our death. This is his last word, the real word. So whether you are interested in legend or in history, you can choose your own.
Wow. And so did the king died, right? 6 months later?
Yes, because, you know, it's interesting to see that the Pope died.
Oh, the Pope
1
died.
month later. 1 month later, Clement V died. But you know, this guy was ill for years. He had cancer. And the king died 6 months later of an heart stroke in the forest of Senlis. And people put all this fact together after. And but after, you see, before, nobody has never expected anything like this. But after, it was easy to put all the things together. And there is an interesting, I would say, clue for me, because one other guy was subject to the curse, the Knight Guillaume. The Knight Guillaume was a prosecutor, and this guy was dead 1 year before. So the curse was also working retroactively, which is for me, very funny.
It is. Well, that's good. You had to sort all that out. What are some other stops on the way, or what happened at the Garden of Square du Temple? Why did they name it that?
You know, when you will be lucky enough to make the tour with me, you will see when you arrive at Square du Temple, everything in the vicinity is named about the Knights Templar. You have, for example, the Rue du Temple, Street of the Temple. You have the metro station, Temple. You have the Square du Temple. Square in French means, garden. And it's a garden. On this garden, formerly, there was the Tower of the Templar. This is where they were having their treasure. Mm-hmm. This is where they were having their manuscript. Remember the letter of change, the different paper showing that they were having a lot of estate everywhere. So this is where they were arrested, and this is where I would say they were have their big tower, which was very, very impressive in the skyline of Paris at this time. And this is the last stop of the visit, and it is also a way to say that even if the Knights Templar story is a little bit fading away 700 years after, I'm here to keep the flame burning and to tell the real story and the legend.
Wow. What books did you like growing up? What was your favorite book growing up?
About the Knights Templar?
Yeah, or in general, what led you to want to discover so much about the Knights Templar?
So if one time my book would be translated, I will recommend it. You have also a book of an American historian, Barber, called Barber, who wrote about the trial of the Knights Templar, which is very interesting because you see the process of justice in the medieval age. And he added many researches, and he, I would say, helped to understand better the story. You have also, but I think it's interesting to watch films and to read books to have a global side, you see. And if you look at to watch Da Vinci Code, for example, it's interesting to see every history fact are here, put together, not in the good way, but in an interesting way.
That's true. What happened at the palace of King Philip the Fair?
Yes, the King Philip the Fair has built a new palace in Paris, which is now called La Conciergerie. You know, concierge, because they were a prison just on the basement. And the guy in charge of the keys was called the concierge, not to take care of your room in the hotel, but to take care of yourself.
It gives you a whole new feeling of going to a hotel. Thanks.
And this is still a prison for people who have drank too much.
Really?
And
wow.
Yeah. And today we have seen many people around. It was interesting. And in this palace, the king was living, and it's interesting to see that the palace, the court of justice, and the Holy Chapel and Notre Dame are on the same place, in the same island, you see? So every, I would say, part of power of the medieval age were located at the same place. You know why? Because this is an island, and it was much more easier to protect an island due to the river around than to be in a normal city. And in the palace, we can see, for example, the tower of the silver tower, where was the treasure of the king, and also a tower. We call it in French the Tour Bonbec, Tower Bonbec. And Bonbec in French means good mouth. You know why? It's again a weird story. Okay. I'm sorry.
What's the story?
And, the Tour Bonbec, good mouth, means because this was a tower where prisoners were tortured. And when you are tortured, you have good mouth. You talk. You see.
Oh, okay.
And you have also the Silver Tower, you have also the Caesar Tower, which is very interesting because you have a good aspect, even now, of how was the castle during the medieval age.
Wow. And how different is medieval Paris from Paris today? Is it a lot different?
Oh, yes. For example, in one of my visits, I make a tour on the towers of Notre Dame. So you have to climb 400 stairs. It's an experience. You you have to have a good brace. But when you are just above, you see Paris and the different Paris. You have a Haussmannian Paris. What we call Haussmannian Paris is the 19th century Paris, built and rebuilt and renovated. You see with a sixth-floor building, very specific of Paris. But you have also on the left bank, for example, and in Le Marais, you have also old medieval house and old street everywhere. Much more difficult to live there because there is no elevators and no aircon.
And
But
exercise.
yes, but it's mixed with, and this is very interesting in Paris because whole buildings and new buildings are mixed together, and it's very different. For example, than London. If you go to London, you have the cities in the center of London. You see the highest skyscraper. In Paris, all the skyscrapers are outside of Paris, and the center, the historical center of Paris, is totally preserved. So you can see you have an idea. It's not the same. You have big street and cars everywhere. You see, it's totally. But you have, I would say, a sort of spirit, which is reminding.
Wow. What's the benefit of getting a tour guide in Paris? Because the lines are so long, especially going to the museums.
Yes, in Paris, you have we as tour guide, we have a sort of specific license. We have to pass a degree for that, a one-year degree. And with this degree, we have a specific license which give us, sorry, access to skip the line access. So we can skip the line, and also we can take reservation. For example, when we want to access to the Tower of Notre Dame, if you want to wait online, you have 1 hour. And when I have my reservation, I can go directly at the specific hour with my group, so it's much more convenient. And this is the same for every big museum of Paris, for example, the Louvre or Musée d'Orsay. So it's a way to, I would say, improve the experience, because if you have to wait in the sun, in the summer, for example, it's quite difficult.
Definitely. So the book is available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, currently the book is published on Amazon, in different also bookshop everywhere. Unfortunately, it's not now translated in English, but I know that you can use a specific application now on the iPhone or whatever. We can directly translate when you are reading, so it's and keeping the layout of the book. So it's very
It is
new.
great. But if they
Yeah,
want to get can I see the hard copy? If they want to get the
yeah.
hard copy of the book?
So if you want to get the hard copy, it's available on different bookshop online. And if people cannot find it, maybe you can just ask me or directly with you to maybe they can order.
Okay.
It's
And
it's a very
it is. And it's in French, right? The original.
yes,
Yeah. It's
yes,
Well, that'd be
and
great. It's a good way to practice learning the language.
yes. And if people don't understand, maybe I can translate them, but another conference.
Exactly. And those apps really do help translate it if they're listening to the book, which helped a lot. So, what advice would you give people that are coming to Paris to visit?
You mean the highlight of Paris, or the good reason to go to Paris?
A good reason to go to Paris. Any tips about traveling there?
Oh, yes. For example, if you want to visit the museum in Paris, and you had better to look at the hours. For example, in the Louvre, you can visit the Louvre because there are nocturnal visits. You can, for example, access to the Louvre at 8 p.m. on Wednesday and Friday, and it's very, very interesting because you have less people. It's a sort of new atmosphere because it's at night and you are living in the movie of Night at the Museum, you see?
Yes.
And so it's one tip. Another tip is to walk because you have a lot of museum and interesting highlights which are very close in Paris. You don't need, except if you have your hotel outside of Paris, but when you are in the center of Paris, I recommend to visitors to get an hotel in the center of Paris, because after that you can walk everywhere. Paris is a small city, you see, so it's easy to come from one neighborhood to another by walk. And specifically now there are a lot of pedestrian walk, and it's another part of the experience. And the last tip is to hire a guy like me. Maybe I could help.
True. And for tour services, you're available on, is it Airbnb tours?
It's for example, my tour, Nice Templar tour, is available on Airbnb, is available also on Viator, on the TripAdvisor experience, you see. And you can also access to my service through my website, tde.fr.
Great. And the last thing that we're going to find in the Knights Templar book before we sign off?
Yes, I can tell you that we enter into a church, now the place of worship of the Order of Malta. And the Order of Malta is the order who continue I would say, not the story of the Knight Templar, but the same idea, the same purpose, because when the order was destroyed, all their possessions were given to the Hospitaller, and the Hospitaller is now the Order of Malta. So in this church, you can see a very interesting atmosphere of, charity action, and also history, and also the history of Louis XVI and different things like this. And it's a very great experience.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing so much about the Knights Templar with us today. We really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to the tour in Paris and asking more questions. Thank you. Until next time, keep asking questions. The answers are astounding.